Yeah, I think this is cool. All right, what's going on, guys? So this is episode 2 of the Sunday Science Stream at 7, and we're gonna do this every week. I'm just gonna keep putting together different subject matter and try to continue off from the week before. Last week I did
Keep putting together different
a whole. That's
different
what I was
subject
waiting on,
matter and
guys.
try
My
to continue.
bad. There we go. There's a lag with my system. Okay, so last week I did a video on philosophy in general and how it sort of applies to science in general. Um, what I want to do today is just focus on science outside of philosophy. So um, I have a few different examples, and basically this started with random medical study, um, and it led me into some microbiology and all sorts of different stuff. I've done this. I've done different studies before and looked into the chicken culling and how this affected the Varroa mite population, how this affected the bee population, etc. And so, what what ended up happening is I started studying some cat parasites, essentially Toxoplasma gondii, and I started studying that because I have alpha gal syndrome, and I caught that from a tick bite called the Lone Star tick. And so one thing leading to another, I end up studying all these different things that sort of have relationships with each other that I don't understand at first. And that's part of why, again, why philosophy is so important in science. You have to be able to determine what tools in the toolbox to use at what time. So with philosophy, you have uh, all these different aspects. They're all different perspectives on how to deal with life. And that comes in handy when dealing with science and dealing with the world around you, where you might be dealing with chemistry and you might be dealing with biology. And it could be any different subject on any different day that you might have to work with. And so the way that you think, how you think about things, is more important than anything. Bringing me to the subject matter at hand. When you start looking at Toxoplasma gondii, most people know it as a cat feces parasite, is what most people know the Toxoplasma gondii as. It is it's associated with pork more often than with anything like red meat or something like that. It's in different mammals. So um, what happens is the Toxoplasma gondii, they swear that it's not affecting humans on the level that we think it is, etc. But they also swear that it impacts 2 billion people, that it's just not a big concern. That up to 2 billion people have the Toxoplasma gondii in them. Um, Now, the reason why this is important to me is because they coexist with the Lone Star tick, the alpha gal syndrome tick. And so, with everybody being uncertain about this new unique food allergy and how people get alpha gal syndrome, which I have, um, everybody's still trying to figure it out. They haven't figured out where the root is, how this is functioning. And so, the Toxoplasma gondii being present with the Lone Star tick allows another avenue of approach, another avenue of study. And another thing is how this impacts the world. I know that most people that talk about Toxoplasma gondii are generally in the conspiracy theorist camp, and they're the everybody makes fun of them, talking about how, oh, you're worried about nothing. Um, I don't dismiss things so easily. I don't just brush them off like that. I see actual data to go on here with this having impacts on people. So, for starters, inflammation is one of the biggest problems in the world, and cancer. One of the first triggers for cancer is inflammation. It starts the process, and that causes the cellular buildup and all the misshapen cells, etc. And so, if Toxoplasma gondii causes inflammation in people, and that's a major problem that can eventually lead to cancers, you would think, hey, what is going on? I can't enunciate that, but I appreciate you. How you doing? But if this is something that causes inflammation, and that's something that everybody's dealing with, you would think that it would be worth looking into. And in general, you can get rid of parasites like that with a 6-week parasite cleanse, at which I'm not selling anything. But you can get rid of stuff like that really easily. And so when I studied how these parasites function, um, I noticed a few things. They eat protein. That's what they eat. That seems to be what they eat is protein, and they are most attracted to pork protein. Now, this is where you start tying in the Lone Star tick, and this is what I'm currently researching right now. The Lone Star tick causes everybody to be allergic to mammal-based products, just all of them, right? Well, over a period of time, what happens is most people end up not being allergic to pork, just the red meat. And they weren't sure of exactly what's going on with this, but if the Toxoplasma gondii coexist with the Lone Star tick, and the Toxoplasma gondii likes pork, the Lone Star tick likes red meat, which I don't suppose it's picky, but that seems to be the theme here. Think of a deer tick. Um, and so what I realized with the trailing off of the pork allergy, you're no longer allergic to pork. Well, what's somebody most likely to do? They're going to want to eat pork. That was my first reaction, and then I went, no, I haven't eaten pork in how long now? Why? I'm fine. I'm healthier without it. Why would I want to eat it? And so this ended up leading me to studies on amyloidosis because of medical history, which overlaps. So, for those of you that don't know, amyloidosis is a prion disorder. There are other prion disorders like this, Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease, and there's things like Creutzfeldt-Jakob that are the human variant of mad cow that are not amyloidosis. These are separate things. But when you study the prion diseases, you realize that these are misshapen protein cells, that they're clumps of misshapen cells. And it's because of that if Toxoplasma gondii eat protein, I mean, if that's what they do is eat protein, and these prion disorders are misshapen proteins, clumps of misshapen protein cells. I have some theories here with data, correlating data, that actually shows where the parasite here wants pork. Okay, I'm not eating any pork for however long, right? Well, like any human being, they're picky. Okay, so they can eat other things, but they prefer the pork. And so what they end up doing is, and this is just a theory, what they could end up doing is taking bites out of the red meat protein and taking bites out of these other proteins, but not finishing them because that's not the protein that they want. This leads to misshaping, misfolding, and it being more difficult to break down. Whereas if these parasites come into contact with the pork protein, they would likely eat all of it because that's what they want. And so the Toxoplasma gondii are found with the pigs in general community, but also with the cat community, the feline community. That's where the cat feces parasite trend comes from. It is because cats eat pork. That's the simplest version, the simplest answer you have for this. Cats eat pork-based things. They are in contact with this sort of stuff. And once a cat is infected, it is very, very easy for a cat to transfer this to other cats through the feces. The second they associate with each other, they transfer this parasite to each other. So the consensus here basically with these parasites is meh. That's been the scientific community in general has been meh, who cares? What's the big deal? And that's an issue when you have so many symptoms that are related to these parasites that aren't being treated in people when it could be as simple as a 6-week parasite cleanse. And so I'm studying deeply the overlaps between Lone Star tick and Toxoplasma gondii and how they cohabitate and how they could work together. Because you have to consider this. If the alpha-gal syndrome makes you stay allergic to red meat, but you end up no longer allergic to the pork, well, the Toxoplasma gondii wins because that's what the Toxoplasma gondii wants is the pork, and the Lone Star tick wins because the Lone Star tick doesn't want you to compete with it for the red meat. And so you lose the red meat, you get the pork back, and now the parasite wins and the deer tick wins. That's a symbiotic parasite host relationship. That's how a lot of things work in nature. And so this brings me over to some of the study that got me down that road. How the chickens that I've talked about before, the chicken cullings. So there was I think it was the year before last, but it was over a few years where they were culling all of these chickens nationwide, and they're blaming COVID, and they're saying that we have to cull the chickens because of COVID. The truth was COVID wasn't killing the chickens. One of them would test positive, and they would force them to kill tens of thousands of chickens. And so this was happening all over the place. And so in the top 5 states that had chicken cullings, there was an adverse reaction that it didn't seem anybody else put together, and this is why I was putting out data on that at the time. So the bee population tanked. That you're talking California, was it North Dakota, Arkansas? There were 5 states, and the majority, or I believe it was all 5 of them. The bee population was just tanking. And I noticed that those were the states where the highest number of chicken cullings were occurring. That's where they were killing the chickens. And so, through study, and it didn't take much because common sense prevails here. Through different study, the chickens eat Varroa mites. They also eat some of the hibiscus mites, I believe. I believe that's how you enunciate that. And so the chickens eat the mites and all these other things associated that eat bee larvae. Okay. So, yes, a chicken may eat a bee larva on occasion, but they're not going for the bee larva so much as they're going for all these other insects. And even if they do eat a bee larva, they're taking some of the insects out that eat the bee larva with it. Chickens are population control. That is the simple version in this food chain here. Chickens are population control. They will eat all of these other insects around the area. They do have an impact on the ecosystem. So when you get to what happened to the bees here, it was pretty obvious that when they started killing all the chickens, the death of the chickens caused a rise in these insect populations. The insect populations started killing off all the bee larvae. Thus, beehives were just being eradicated. They tried to blame climate change in both directions. And this is the problem with bringing politics into stuff like this. Philosophy, very important in science. Most of the time, we just need to keep politics the hell out, unless we're applying science with politics somewhere. The point here is that they tried to blame climate change for the bee problem. They tried to blame climate change for the chicken problem. But they were not putting these problems together as they actually existed, how one was impacting the other. And it obviously wasn't climate change. And so when you cull chickens and you force people in these states to kill millions of chickens, you are going to cause a rise in the insect population. The insect population is going to kill the bees. That's the problem here. So when you get into other microbiology study, etc., when you get into all these studies on parasites and how they impact the environment, well, parasites and Lone Star ticks coexist, etc., but these specific parasites, these Toxoplasma Gondii, they are working with the Lone Star tick. They cohabitate. They go after the same stuff. It seems to be that they are in some sort of symbiotic relationship. That they are in some manner of a helpful relationship with each other. And this is a parasite and a host kind of relationship, but I don't know whether the parasite would be actually utilizing the Lone Star tick as a host, or whether they just coexist with each other and work together, and the parasite just uses us as a host and the cats as a host, etc. I don't know how exactly their relationship would function. The only thing that I can say for certain is that they are benefiting from this relationship in innumerable ways, and they are also impacting humans together and this food allergy stuff. Another point here, and this is very important. The Toxoplasma gondii goes after protein. The alpha gal syndrome allergy is a sugar allergy. It's not a protein allergy. It's a very rare, unique allergy to that effect. So, when you're dealing with a rare, unique food allergy like that reacts to sugar molecules instead of proteins, why would that be? Um, well, if the Toxoplasma gondii wants the protein, it doesn't need the sugar. It doesn't want any of that. So it if your body's not reacting to the protein's still good to eat. Your body's just reacting to the sugar. So now the Toxoplasma gondii can get that protein, and you don't get any benefit from from this essentially. Um, so with them working together, this is a cause and effect, causation correlation. There's way too much data tying these two insects together. When you get into the prion disorders, and again, amyloidosis is typically associated with a genetic marker. Um, Whereas Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease is the human mad cow variant. It is mad cow in human beings, and so Creutzfeldt-Jacob is a different kind of prion disease. It's not it's not the same, but they still are studying all of these things. There's no way for them to stop a Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease. That's a serious problem, but they very rarely have a case of it. This isn't a normal everyday sort of disease that spreads. And so with the Toxoplasma gondii and things like amyloidosis, not everybody gets MRIs. Not everybody gets CT scans. Not everybody figures out everything that's wrong with them. Some people deal with things for years and then die of something else, and then nobody really investigates to figure out what else was going on with their health. We do the best we can with the data that we have when you're dealing with medical science. And so when it comes to something like a parasite, that people are brushing off and shrugging off as if it's nothing, it's hard to get a lot of the data because it's not being looked for. You have to go to specific people. And so I've reached out to a couple of I don't want to name names, but I've sent emails out to a couple of microbiologists on the subject specifically, and I'm trying to find uh, a discussion board, or somewhere where we can have a conversation about these things. And these parasites, the reason why it became an internet thing originally, it's like the cordyceps zombies, the cordyceps parasite zombie things. People, they hear about something, they freak out, and maybe there's something there, but it's not always as extravagant as people make it out to be. And so in this case, there could be uh, a serious parasite problem with the cats. So I pointed out this random stuff. I I'm not on I'm not 100% on the side that they're a major problem, that they're definitely causing these things. But I see a lot of correlation, a lot of causation, a lot of this leading to that, and data that just can't be ignored and brushed off. And so I think about cats, and I study cats. That my dad has cats, my brother has cats, friends have had cats. I've been around them for years, and they're not as clean as people make them out to be. So people will tell me they're the cleanest animals I know of, and I'll say why, and they'll say, well, they clean themselves all day, and I'm like, because they're effing dirty. Like you don't have to clean yourself all day unless you're dirty. I don't know why that's hard to figure out. Like if you tell me that an animal is cleaning itself all day, spends most of its time cleaning itself, it's filthy. Like there's no reason to clean yourself otherwise. And so um, I already see cats as filthy, even though I love them. Dogs, they're dirty, but cats are not the clean animals they're made out to be. And when it comes to these parasites, what happens is they get into the cats, gets into the feces, it spreads through the feces, and then it spreads from the feces into the house, all over the house, and then the people get it, and people get these parasites in them, and then the government says it doesn't affect anybody, and for the few that do, they're just rare exceptions. I would say it's more that for most people, you would have a mild impacts from it, and that your body, for a lot of people, it would process out of your system. That's not true for everybody, and that's not true forever. That's another thing to consider. So if I was going to jump down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, if I was just going to dive right on in, I'd uh, I'd talk about stuff like ancient Egypt and the surrounding areas, or how and you can point out, you can see these things to point out these comparisons. So like, um, the Egyptians worshipped cats. Oh well, it's like, yeah. So what? Jews don't eat pork. That's a thing. Well, like, well, Muslims don't eat pork. Well, you get to a point where it's like, where did these ancient traditions come from, and why? Were they originally rooted in this science, and that they knew about parasites or something like that? Um, they specifically call these animals unclean, and it's because of that when an outright religion bans a food classification, something happened, and I would not put it past them that there was that there were ancient parasites, that there really were, that ancient parasites were infecting and causing these problems, this, that, and the other. And so they said, no more pork, no more pig, no more this, no more that. And I could see that throughout history. So modern day, telling me that these things aren't having an impact on anybody, I'm hesitant to believe there's no impact. I don't think that it has to be the most extreme, but you you study history and you learn we don't learn from history, and you wonder how many things that we miss with these collapses in society and what actually happened, etc. And I would not put it past parasite or bacteria or this, that, and the other in many cases. And in this case, there happen to be a lot of overlapping data with my own medical history and with my own genetic studies and all this stuff, that I wanted to really look into Toxoplasma gondii, and it is because of the cat shit parasite. So imagine if it is affecting cats psychologically. Uh, I noticed that with cats, they play with their feces in the litter box, then they spread it around the house, and then they clean themselves. They lick their paws clean. The easier way to not get your paws dirty is to not play with your shit. Um, but they do that. They play with it, and then they spread it, and then they clean their paws. I find that odd behavior. A dog will eat their crap. It's to cover it up, cover up the smell. I don't see dogs play with their crap. I've seen them eat it. Just call them dumb. That's fine. But cats will literally play with it and then scatter this stuff throughout the house. Another thing I've noticed is how cats will always put their butt in people's faces, and they put their tails straight up. Um, that is like parasite behavior to me. If you've ever watched the horror movies, you know what I mean. That is really parasitic behavior, where it's just like, why is it that when the cat's butt is in the most effective place to spread the virus, that's when it wants to expose itself? Because cats don't want you to have your hand near it. They don't want you to have your foot near it. Like, anytime you look like you're going to pet their back too close to their backside, the tail comes down, they wrap around, they cover up. That's how cats act. And so the fact that they react that way when they are in a vector of transmission, when they are the most likely to spread a cat parasite, it's a really weird thing to me. The diet, like I was saying, again, cats, a lot of them heavy on the pork. So the more I look into all this stuff, and I keep finding little tidbits of information, I see a real correlation between the coexistence of the Lone Star tick and the parasite, the Toxoplasma gondii, I see a correlation in prion diseases with the destruction of proteins, and that just happens to be the diet of Toxoplasma gondii. Um, and I see a lot of symptoms like inflammation, behavioral disorders, and things like that that are associated with Toxoplasma gondii that we just keep blaming on other things and saying that, well, maybe it's probably that, it's probably that. If Toxoplasma gondii causes behavioral changes and it causes inflammation and it causes a lack of impulse control, etc., and everybody has cats and not everybody is clean, and so these parasites are effing everywhere. I refuse to accept that it's not having an impact on anybody. I would say it's actually a likely culprit for people's mild inflammation and problems with soreness and stuff like that. But the simple solution is, and I'm not going to promote anybody because I'm not selling anything, is a 6-week parasite cleanse. Just do one. I mean, if you're not in contact with cats, especially on a regular basis, just do one. See if you feel better. And the reason for that is because of the association with prion disorder being associated with protein and that being what they eat. The association of Toxoplasma gondii with the Lone Star tick and how it wants pork. There's all of these correlations on these species and in their world and how they function. This seems like a parasite that is effective. It seems like a parasite that is functioning, and it seems like a parasite that is having real world impacts on everybody. So I'm not going to take the extreme route of the cordyceps zombie and say that it's an extreme problem. We have to burn it down now and then get rid of all the cat. I'm not going to take that extreme approach, but I am going to say we need to do some studies right now that are really easy to do. The first of those is, and again, I've already sent emails out, but the first of those is one simple study. Take these parasites, put them in your petri dish. Okay, if you're at MIT or whoever happens to stumble across this video, put these parasites in the petri dish and put red meat proteins over here and put pork proteins over here. Okay, you see if they are drawn to the pork proteins. But step 2, put them in a petri dish with only red meat and only red pork, because this is the important part as far as testing for prion disorders. If they start taking bites out of the red meat protein and leaving it, that's a likely culprit for how these things are getting malformed and clustered together. Because they're looking for a better protein source. They want the pork. They can't find it. So they take a few bites, they move on to the next meal. It's no different than you or I looking for a steak dinner and we keep getting spinach. Okay, we're going to, yeah, I mean, it's enough, but I want something else. And so you're going to go look for something else. The parasite would react no differently. And so if it does that with the red meat, then that is a likely culprit for the prion disorders. Also, if it eats all of the pork protein, okay, if when it comes into contact with a pork protein, it throws down like it's its birthday and that's the first thing it's seen all week, okay, that means that it will finish the pork protein, but it won't finish the red meat protein. It only eats enough to sustain itself. That would cause a prion deficiency, a prion disorder, malformations and clumps of cells, etc. And so the Toxoplasma gondii, whether you're looking at it from the perspective of cats and how it's affecting people because they've been domesticated and we're more in contact with them, and you study it from the occult sense of like Egypt worshiping cats, and maybe we've been through this problem before historically, that's fine. Or if you look at it through the lens of how it is the Toxoplasma gondii living with the Lone Star tick and how this could have caused the alpha-gal syndrome, and it might not be the tick, especially considering that it's a unique sugar molecule that won't impact the protein. This Toxoplasma gondii seems to be a linchpin somewhere, a connecting factor with some of the conditions that we have that we deal with on a daily basis. And I would not be quick to dismiss the Toxoplasma gondii as a no problem. I really would. If you're working with this kind of stuff at all, I'd do your research. I'd look into it, because this isn't just a cat thing. This is something where we have a parasite that's working with other things in its environment and ecosystem that are also impacting human beings, like the alpha-gal syndrome. So something to think about today. Again, I'll be doing this every week and doing a different science subject every week, and kind of trying to address random things that might actually help. I don't want to just be talking to talk. That's the main thing. If I don't have anything to talk about, it's a waste of a show. And so I want subject matter. But the other thing is I want Q&A. I want feedback. So if anybody has any questions or if they want to discuss something specifically, let me know in the chat. I might bring it up next weekend. I might be able to bring it up at the end of the show. But my baseline here is I want to at least talk for about 30 minutes, give or take, on any given subject. Last week it was how philosophy plays a role in physics, and the reason for that is I want people to be able to think on their own. I want you to know how to think. Philosophy is very important when it comes to understanding how to think. It's how I'm able to discuss things like the Toxoplasma Gondii with a Lone Star tick versus Prion diseases versus this or that. Newton, I'll say it every video if I had to. Sir Isaac Newton had a degree in philosophy and mathematics. Logic, yes. Also, inquisitiveness, philosophy. How does this work? So, very important. I won't keep harping on that every video, but study philosophy. Other than that, take care. There's not really much news going on in my world. Everything's going as planned. There will be another video next week at 7 o'clock as usual. I did not have a guest tonight. I do want to address that. I spoke with a couple people. One of them is out of country. He did not get back to me in time. He told me that might happen, so that's fine. But I will have a guest. I'm not setting a set routine with a guest. It's right now it's sort of first come first serve. Until then, it'll also be random videos throughout the week whenever I feel like it, but nothing set in stone. So if you don't hear from me this week, be here next Sunday, and I will let you all know usually by Friday, Saturday night what the material is going to be about. And then if you want to dive into it on your own beforehand so that you can ask some questions, that's kind of what I'm going for here. Is that way Friday, the subject matter is out. Saturday, I can get a little bit of feedback from you. And then Sunday, I can be prepared to discuss things that you all specifically want to know about. But other than that, thank you to everybody that tuned in. I appreciate you. We are slowly growing. I've picked up a few new fans at every single one of these. So I really do appreciate you. I also don't have they don't give you access to the full studio straight off the bat. So I don't have full YouTube studio yet. I have to get my fan base built up first. So once I get there, I'll be able to do some cool stuff like intros and random stuff like that. But thank you again, guys. Like, subscribe, share all that stuff, and I will see you next week.